Welcome to episode 261 of the Barcelona podcast, brought to you by the Blue Wire Podcast Network. I'm Dan Hilton, and today I'm joined by Emile Evanesian. We do have another show coming out later in the week, but fortunately for all of you, Sergio, Agüero, and it looks like Eric Garcia, and this is coming down in the last hour or so by the time we record this, they are officially Barcelona players, so we are doing two shows this week to discuss these signings. But first, it may not be a signing, but I do want to welcome back to the show Emile. And Emile, I want to give you the floor for a second just to introduce yourself again.
Sure. So my name is Emile Evanesian. I am originally from Los Angeles. I spent the last 15 years in New York. It was during that time that I got to know you, Dan, and wrote a couple of pieces for Barca blog and made my inaugural appearance on the podcast. And it was during that time. I've been a Barca fan for about another, around the same time, maybe about 18, 20 years since kind of access to the internet and Barcelona games was readily available. I'm fortunate that my dad was is a Barcelona fan from a long time back. So he kind of filled me in on what was awesome about it and Johan Cruyff and the Dream Team and kind of all that good stuff. And about 20 months ago, so in about 4 months before COVID hit, my wife and I relocated to Barcelona. And so we actually are, I guess I'm coming to you live from Barcelona. And in the meantime, I've written for several years about the NBA. My website for a long time, it's still live. I do more freelance, but my website has always been hardwoodhype.com. And in addition, I have written about Spanish football in general. I mean, predominantly Barcelona for, I guess it's going on about a dozen years. It's picked up more probably, I'd say, in the last maybe 7 or 8 years. And like I said, I've done a couple of pieces for Barca blog. I've written for Barca Blaugranes fairly regularly, the SB Nation Barca site. Mm-hmm. And in addition, I wrote, I think as I sent you, the kind of an absolute tome on the 1996-1997 Barca season, and Ronaldo, Robson, and an absolute fever dream of a Copa del Rey game against Atletico de Madrid. And so these days, my wife and I are happy living in Barcelona. I am freelance writing both about sports and about other things, and also doing kind of communications consulting and sort of strategic consulting for small businesses and startups.
So Emile just joined us, as you heard, with not only a plethora and years of experience understanding and watching FC Barcelona, just like me, but if you thought that once Frances left, the NBA talk was going to stop, it is not. So Emile is, we're going to be talking we're going to be throwing in our NBA analogies. Those will continue on. Don't you worry. So with Emile helping us out there, and as well, again, Emile living in Barcelona, he has access to all of those, the papers that, again, many of you can find on the internet, but Emile is a little bit of our Barcelona insider. So we welcome Emile to the show because the first challenge you have as one of the new co-hosts of the show is to kind of get comfortable about the new signings that we have and kind of looking ahead to what the new season will behold. And I think, Emile, before we even say anything about Aguero or Eric Garcia coming in, I think we just should discuss these signings in the bigger picture. So these two are not the ones that will change the fortunes of a title race next year. That would be Memphis Depay or Wijnaldum if they choose to come, which it looks like they probably will be. And by the time I finish this sentence with the rate at which FC Barcelona is announcing and Laporte is announcing players, by the time I finish talking, they might already be at the Camp Nou and already in jerseys. Who knows? But for the just Aguero and Garcia, they do address positional needs, and Barcelona are doing these deals for cheap. Same thing, even with Depay and Wijnaldum, they're free transfers. So the business that Barcelona had to do, I think for a long time, and again, I don't want to drag completely the name of just Bartomeu, but I think for a long time, whether it was the veterans being paid more, I think players came in for Barcelona expecting to be paid a lot of money, and they expected to be coming on huge transfers, and I think other teams knew that Barcelona, there was a desperation in their signing. And by getting free transfers, whether it's the Laporta factor or not, whether it's Messi in the twilight of his career, I don't think he's pulling strings, but I do think that Barcelona has made a way, even through this transition season, to become attractive. And it almost reminds me of the Brooklyn. Here's our first NBA one with how the Brooklyn Nets, they had built that fun, hardworking team under Kenny Atkinson, and then all of a sudden, Kyrie and Kevin Durant decide that they want to play there too because they like the project, right? And even though a project that includes Lionel Messi can't be considered, an upstart or, there's no surprises there, but
plucky underdog when you have Messi, but yeah.
No. But I think that the transition year that Koeman showed you is that if Barcelona had lost their way or were in the wilderness for a few seasons and maybe free agents didn't want to come there, now it appears that whether it's, again, the Laporta factor or whatever it may be, the transition season that they had showing that there is a new generation even coming through, it seems to have attracted free agents back. And I think that, of all else, is the most positive sign for me, regardless of the quality of the players, or we can argue about the individual players, but I think the whole mission and the idea is what, it kind of makes me positive as to getting these guys to sign on the dotted line for lesser money.
I completely agree. Well, I mean, I think because I think, and I probably fall into the same boat as you. I mean, I think I sort of, it's impossible to talk about, I guess, maybe the last half dozen years or so and kind of everything that's wobbled or just outright kind of fallen apart over the last few years without invoking Bartomeu's name. And so I do think, well, on the one hand, I mean, Laporta coming in isn't just sort of a kind of a silver bullet savior, because the problems that exist, whomever's fault they are, they persist. I mean, there's the massive debt load, there's the epic the cash crunch and like the epic wage bill. And so it's something that you have to work around, because irrespective of kind of what kind of a tight spot you're in, you still have to play next season. Like, you have to field a team, you have to figure out like who's going to put on the shirt and do these things. And to go out and get, so far it's Garcia and Kun Aguero. And and like you said, Wijnaldum and Depay look like they're, if not done deals, I mean, they look very likely. To get those guys with no outlay, and Sergio Aguero, I mean, I guess we can maybe even just get into, I guess I'm going to kind of wander into Aguero territory here. So, I mean, I was reading today, I mean, he's reducing his Man City salary by, is it 2/3? I believe I read that. So he's reducing it by 2/3, and I guess he'll get a sizable bonus if Barca win the Champions League, which if they do, I'm sure they'll be more than happy to give him the extra money. And I mean, to get that guy, and I know kind of he's getting older. He just turned 33, and
tomorrow, actually. Yeah, for when we're recording, yeah. So happy birthday to him tomorrow. I know I have to do the Instagram Photoshop now, and he signed just in time where I have to do the whole birthday thing, but yeah.
So happy birthday to Kun Aguero. And so, so he's 33 now. He's obviously, he's been a professional for a long time. He's got a lot of miles on him. Like, that's well trodden. That's well known. But, and I know, his knees are injured, and you don't magically just recover like that. That wear and tear doesn't just go away because you're nominally healthy. But with that being said, I mean, with the exception of last year, which we can write off a little bit to an injury-plagued season, which it very clearly was. I mean, I was looking at his statistics just for the past kind of 6 or 7 years. I mean, even, when he was about to turn 32, he scored 23 goals in 32 games. The year before, he had 32 and 46. And I was actually looking of the last 7 years prior to this season, which was kind of a lost year, he averaged at least 2/3 of a goal per game for City in 6 of those years. I mean, I guess, and excuse me. So at the very least, I mean, this guy is a proven, kind of experienced, high level professional. Like, he's a good player who's seen the biggest stages. He's performed, and he's consistently performed over a long time. I mean, I don't expect him to go back to being sort of 2014, 2015 Aguero, but at the same time, I mean, there's no reason that, again, the health caveat's always there, but assuming a reasonable level of health, he's a good finisher, and
Yeah.
he's tidy in the box. He can kind of control the ball in tight spaces. He knows how to kind of snatch onto rebounds and put the ball in the net, which is a frequent complaint with
Yeah.
Barca
Well,
strikers.
I
And sort
think,
of,
yeah, I mean, I think looking at last year, it's a bad faith argument because not only did he start less than 18% of all matches for Man City, 6 goals, 1 assist in 21 matches, including 2 goals on the very last day of the Premier League season against Everton, but he did not only have a season full of injuries and dealt with COVID, but it's really the grand argument of a lot of times strikers at 32, 33, that is the age where they fall off a cliff. But he's also, I think, deserving of, not to say legend status, but I think he is deserving of not only a second opportunity, but the understanding that last year feels like worst case scenario because, as you mentioned, the years prior to that, and all just the sample size that we have, that even guys like a Luis Suarez, you saw Suarez this year, it looked like physically he was ready to drop off that cliff. And then for Atletico Madrid, he doesn't, and it depends on role. And so I think Aguero's he's gonna hold down a role that isn't gonna require him to be a superstar. But all that said, I also think too, where I wonder if his reputation and why people seem to be, thinking of him almost as an afterthought. I wonder if his reputation has been hurt by not only playing for Argentina in Messi's shadow, playing for Atletico Madrid before their rise to prominence, so just as they were about to get there, and then never playing for one of the top. And you have to think of this too, at least in the English-speaking world, the Spanish-speaking is different, but because he never played for one of the largest supported teams in the UK, being Manchester United, Liverpool, or Arsenal, I don't really think that helped his profile. I think, if anything, it hurt his profile, even though he scored, arguably in 2012 against QPR, arguably the most famous and memorable goal in Premier League history. And yet that's seen at kind of this moment in time, right? That's just this outlier. And the fact that his career has basically been that every step of the way. I mean, he's constantly scored goals in big times and big matches. And even now, his Twitch is definitely the highest profile thing he's ever done. But he doesn't often do interviews. And his English seems almost non-existent after being in Manchester for 7 years, which is kind of interesting or kind of weird to know.
I don't think he speaks English like at all.
Well, not that not to say that I'm impressed with football, but that's how I feel about my Spanish. Where can I speak and understand it? Yes, but you're never gonna are never gonna let our listeners in on that. So it's the same thing. And so because the UK never marketed him, in the UK he was never marketed as a superstar, and I think that actually hurts his case. But when you look at his numbers year in and year out, with last season just being the one outlier, this is truly one of the top 30 or 25 players of the last 10 years. I mean, that's how important he is to the game.
I think even a smaller number, like top smaller number than 30 or 25. Because, I mean, even just going back, I mean, like I said, last year, 23 and 32 games is, I mean, objectively very good. But if you go back, I mean, and so it's not like, I feel like there was this perception, and there was a little bit too, I think, like when Pep arrived at Man City, and they brought in Gabriel Jesus, and it was almost seen as, and Aguero, there was a year or two there where the perception was that he was a little bit out of favor, and Pep was kind of getting ready to move him on and put him out to pasture, and he was going to either, Gabriel Jesus would be the new striker, or it would be someone else, or it would be some new iteration of Pep's kind of strikerless sort of machine that he puts out. But all the while, I mean, starting from like 2013 through 2018-19, his goals were 28, 32, 29, 33, 30, 32. I mean, this guy produces. And the notion that he's sort of, now look, between age and injury, this could look very silly, what I'm, kind of the way, the regard that I'm holding him in. But I mean, there's no reason to think he wasn't on the decline. His like kind of per game production wasn't on the decline. He's an intelligent player, so, and that doesn't kind of atrophy with age. And so there's no reason to look at this as anything other than, I mean, Barcelona got a really good striker, a good and kind of proven, battle-tested striker who's won things and performed in key moments. And the fact that he has both kind of a close personal affinity with Messi, in addition to kind of a lot of, I was reading an article. So apparently for Argentina, he and Messi have played something like 4,600 minutes together, and they have each assisted the other like 9 times. So even in that sense, like there's a rapport there. They know one another. I mean, they've known one another since, youth level. So they know one another and they like each other. And then on top of that, playing together isn't a foreign concept to either of them, and they know how to facilitate one another. And they've, Argentina's never, lifted the big trophy or anything, but they've succeeded together, playing together for Argentina. So I think all in all, and given the low financial risk of it, I mean, I think it's sort of all upside and, really exciting.
Yeah. Well, it's
and if
interesting.
You can't tell, I really like Sergio Aguero too, just on a personal level. Like I will not, if it doesn't work out, I will eat all the crow. I will eat all the apple pie. But you will not hear me besmirch Sergio Aguero a moment before I absolutely have to.
Well, I think he also stays out of trouble, and I wonder what his role is going to be, because when we were preparing for last season, and I'll do this later on over the summer, and I thought about what the expectations were for each player. And I remember going through and saying, hey, how many goals did it take to win the Liga? And the unfortunate thing this season is that Barcelona, because they double digits more goals than Atletico Madrid and Real Madrid, you can't dictate that this number of goals will win you the Liga, because goal conceded is important too. So, I mean, I think the answer to how good Aguero will be dependent on role, and then where his deficiencies do hurt Barcelona. Because, as we said about the goal scoring, you can't tell me that, just doing the math here, right, that if Fati, who last year had 5 goals and 4 assists, if you potentially say that Fati could jump back up to what I think is reasonable of 10 goals, right, or 15, if he's even a bit healthy. So if Fati's not healthy and his career doesn't go the right way, then yes, you'll have to make up for that. But the expectations is that a 90% or 80% Ansu Fati this year will get 10 to 15 goals, right? And then for Kun Aguero, that with Braithwaite, and we don't know who's going out, but Dembele had 11, Griezmann had 20, Trincao had 3, and Braithwaite had 7, and of course Messi had 38, which is ridiculous. Yeah. But the point is, Messi is almost the outlier.
Messi plays his own game. Yeah.
Right. As him as the outlier, let's say Trincao and Braithwaite might not have a future, or Callado isn't the one that's going to come up, and Kun Aguero is taking those minutes. Now, how many goals does he need to account for, right? We're not sure about, again, Depay and Griezmann as well. I mean, so with Dembele, Griezmann, Depay, we're not sure who's where. The expectation, I think, for me would be, if Kun Aguero is even a sub off the bench, you hope that, and he gets occasional starts as well. As, again, I said that last year he might have started 18 matches for Man City, but prior to that, the season before, he started 84% of matches. So last year truly was the outlier. So even if he starts, say, 40% of all games for FC Barcelona, or 30% of all games for FC Barcelona, you can't tell me that he's not capable of 12 goals. And those 12 goals, I think, is all that we should expect of him. Now, my big concern is not because he's one of the greatest goal scorers, not just of the last 15 years, but greatest goal scorers all time. He's one of the greatest goal scorers in Premier League history, in all of UK history. That's just how many goals he scored. Plus, he didn't even go to Manchester until he was 23. So he'd spent time banging goals with Atletico Madrid. It's not like he started in 18 or 19 like a Michael Owen or even like an Alan Shearer did. Now, my big concern...
He had another 102 goals in all competitions with Atletico.
Right.
Before he arrived in Manchester.
Yeah. He's a goal scorer through and through. Now, the big issue, and I think this is going to go down to both locker room and on the field, is the idea of the Club de los Amigos. So that the biggest concern with the Los Amigos, if you will, on the field is the press with Messi and Aguero. And now the advanced metrics said Messi pressed under Koeman more than he had in the year and a half prior. So it's true, though, that for all the young players that are playing nowadays on the field, a spine that still would exist of Aguero, Messi, Busquets, and Piqué, you do wonder, especially with them all being 1 year older, are they going to make the opposition look good as they break through what I can't imagine would be intense pressing and intense ball recovery? You can't have 4 players in your starting 11 and ask them to be able to press for more than, 30 minutes of a 90-minute stretch, which is not the way not only that Koeman wants to play, but it's not the way that attacking-wise Barcelona are at their best, right? Getting Messi downhill in transition, getting, especially even Pedri. As I mentioned, I thought he was one of the best players on the counterattack in all of the Liga this year. So getting Pedri turned with an open field is what you want. But Messi and Aguero, that's not necessarily how they're going to be. They're not going to be capturing the ball back in supporting one another. And I think it's a rightful fear, Emile, that we're going to see Messi and Suarez and their press 2.0, which we know obviously in that last season. That's the biggest reason why I've been telling people. I know that it hurts that Luis Suarez won La Liga, but that's why it made sense, because he made sense with Atletico Madrid, but he just didn't make sense with Barcelona anymore. And I mean, that makes sense. So having Aguero come in, I think people are worried that he's not going to make sense. But Luis Suarez is also the out-and-out starter every match, and I don't think that's what Sergio Aguero is.
Well, because I think and Suarez was, I mean, he was the unquestioned starter, almost irrespective of kind of form and injury, kind of within reason. I mean, well, form, whether he was going well or not, he was kind of in the starting 11, unless kind of he said he wanted to rest, almost for, and I mean, Aguero's not getting the same he's not going to get that same treatment. He's not at the same kind of point in his career. He is older, so that can also be used kind of almost in kind of a bargaining with him, or as far as determining his role and understanding kind of what it is that the team is going to ask of him. I mean, I don't think he's not meant to be a kind of start 36 league games and play 75, 80 minutes a game, or more. So I think you get him in shorter bursts. I think he's going to get starts as long as he's healthy. I mean, I can see him starting, I could see him starting maybe a third of the games. And especially if he's healthy and he's moving well and and everything is kind of back together. If his knees are in good shape and he's meshing with the team well, I mean, why don't you want that guy starting a lot? But I mean, I agree with you in the sense that stylistically it could create a little bit of an issue. And I do think like that does kind of run through the spine, as you said, where you can't, it's the spine and kind of the structure of the team isn't going to support sort of that hard pressing style for sort of the entirety of a game. I mean, I think you do it you might do it in bursts or kind of as a change of pace, but I don't think that can be sort of your plan A or even just necessarily your default.
Yeah, I think the best thing to get from Aguero is something that, again, he's done consistently all throughout his career, even the 2018-19 season, in that 2-1 win over Liverpool that basically gave Man City the title. Kun Aguero scores big goals, and I think that was the one thing missing as I went through the attacking force this year for FC Barcelona, that they just did not score goals in big moments and big games. And that is one thing that Luis Suarez for Atletico Madrid did, and that's one thing that Suarez, with the exception of away Champions League matches, that's one thing that Luis Suarez did as well throughout his Barcelona career. So having a big game scorer, there is something to it, to dealing with that pressure and being in that moment.
Oh, I agree completely. I mean, I think one of the biggest things was, particularly not so much this year, but in the couple of years prior, I mean, I guess the whole Messi dependence conversation is probably like a decade old now, but in general, sort of all of these sort of high pedigree, big money attackers would be brought in to play alongside Messi and even Suarez. And kind of Luis Suarez and Neymar were sort of the only ones that have come in and sort of accepted a certain level where they understand Messi is Messi, and you're not really here to unseed Messi. Messi's never going to be option number 2, but at the same time, they were still up for every big moment, and they had a sense of what was at stake for them as well. Where there have been others who've kind of, come in or sort of pass through the club that the talent and kind of the ability is undeniable, but they didn't seem kind of, I don't want to say up to the moment because that sounds sort of lame, but I mean, it's a little bit of that, or they kind of, they didn't understood where they fit and it was either they would be ultra deferential to a point where they were just completely passive, or it would be kind of, I'm going to try to do something. I have to prove that I am worthy of being an FC Barcelona player on the front line with Lionel Messi. And it didn't, and it seems like a lot of guys have struggled to kind of strike the proper balance between sort of understanding where you are on the food chain and also still having a little bit of that professional arrogance to say that, no, I'm really good. They pay me,
Hmm.
they paid a ton of money for me, and they pay me a ton of money because I'm really good. And I'm gonna show that, but also understanding sort of where you fit into the whole. And I think the good thing is that I think Aguero, for a couple of reasons. One, he's he's so experienced, and two, I think with Guardiola kind of, sort of fidgeting with the Man City, with the squad and the setup and the formations and who goes where. I think he's already also experienced in the idea of, like, you don't have a set role, like the way
Hmm.
Luis Suarez was
Yeah,
up
that
front
makes
in
sense
the
to me.
middle
Yeah.
every week.
Hmm.
So I think Aguero's learned to be sort of tactically diverse and sort of just kind of mentally sort
Yeah.
of understand that his role is going to shape shift, and he has to kind of contribute where he can and do as well as he can.
Yeah, I think that's a great. Yeah, I think that's a great counter argument to the Los Amigos thing, where that Kun Aguero had to play a certain role for Pep Guardiola, and I think Pep does have a certain reverence that Ronald Koeman obviously doesn't have. But that said, at Barcelona, Koeman does. Like, as much as we in the media look at his managerial career, and I've done it many times, we look at his managerial career and go, no, he's not Pep Guardiola. Obviously, he's not. But in terms of at FC Barcelona, at that club, he's a legend just the same. He's, as far as the player, he was a bigger legend than Pep Guardiola was as a player. And obviously, coaching is different, but there is a certain cachet to him. So, I mean, I do want to quickly move to, not quickly, but I do want to do the Eric Garcia thing now. So I think people who've been listening to the show for weeks and months, as Eric Garcia was rumored, but it wasn't definite. I think I've kind of sprinkled in the argument I'm going to make, and I feel like I'm in the minority on the Eric Garcia point too. So I think if people know, I'm going to be not overwhelmingly positive, but I tried to convince myself, Emile, using all that negativity from Twitter. I tried to internalize that, or even our close Facebook group, who are generally positive, but I tried to internalize all that negativity of what people were seeing, and I dug it. I'm going to have all the boring numbers for you. So, Emile, I'm going to let you answer the Eric Garcia thing first, and then I'll let people take their mid-podcast nap, because I have all those advanced metrics that really do make me question that. I know the eye test were telling people that the 20-year-old struggled this year, but he is just 20. So, Eric Garcia, I'm overwhelmingly excited for this signing. I truly am. So I would say I don't know how you could possibly, Emile, be as excited as I am for it, because I also want to back up why I'm as excited for it as I am.
Sure. So, I mean, while acknowledging that I am probably not quite as excited as you are, but that's actually not to say that I'm not negative on the move, because it's sort of, and I hate that right now we're sort of in this place where every Barcelona transaction sort of like has such a high kind of financial risk reward analysis attached to it.
Hmm.
But I think the reality is that, yeah, I mean, I've seen him play, I mean, very, very sparingly. So I mean, I've kind of watched some YouTube and things like that, but I'm by no means sort of an expert. But I've, kind of everything that I've read about him and just sort of understanding kind of how he's been regarded in years past. And but you look, and first of all, the biggest thing that I keep coming back to is he's 20 years old and costs nothing to bring to the club. So that's already well worth it. I mean, just whether it works out or not, I mean, I think that's just sort of intelligent business. But I mean, I think, but when you look beyond that, he's, you know, he's won, at youth levels. I think it was 17, U17 and U19 or something.
Hmm.
He's won major tournaments, against, against competition of his peers. So obviously he's going to be going up against, sort of more physically mature and more mentally mature competition. Yeah, and there's probably going to be growing pains. But I also don't think he's intended to come in tomorrow and sort of drop anchor in the middle of defense and just become an absolute, become a stalwart. But I think he's a risk very much worth taking. He kind of he looks the part. He's a strong, he's a strong kid. Like he's sort of he moves well. And there's no reason to think that he can't be at the very least just a good kind of functional squad player, if not just even sort of spot starter rotation player. But I don't know where it comes from, where people are proclaiming kind of at this point that he can't be more than that, or he won't even be that, or he's not even worth the risk. Because I mean, at 20 years, I'm going to I'm going to kind of sprinkle in a little bit of NBA, but I think it kind of applies to football, to soccer as well. I think we've gotten so used to like precocious talents being so precocious at so young an age that like in the NBA draft, if a guy comes out who played for 3 or 4 years in college and was really kind of an intelligent player who helped win games and put up big numbers, but he comes out and he's 21 and a half years old, he's looked at as too old. It's, why would you draft this guy? Like, you're not getting any upside. He's 21 years old, and they're like, he's being spoken about as though he's kind of like a broken down 34-year-old or something. Mm-hmm. And and you get a lot of that. And it happened. I mean, obviously, I guess like Messi is sort of the ultimate example, and it was, whether it was him or there's been Cristiano was really good he was great by a young age. Mm-hmm. And there's obviously more recently there's like Haaland and Mbappe, and you see these guys, and that becomes the standard by which good young player is judged. And we lose sight of the fact that no, these dudes are really, really rare. Like, that's lightning in a bottle. So sometimes at 20, you have to continue developing, and like you learn and you compete and you get better. And I mean, you look at a lot of the guys sort of who have been good. I mean, you look at like even Gerard Piqué. He played for Manchester United. I don't remember exactly how old he was when he came back to Barcelona, but so he played for Manchester United, and he played, and he wasn't bad. But I mean, like, I don't know that. I mean, they let him leave for like £4 million or euros. So clearly, Sir Alex Ferguson wasn't sufficiently enamored with him to even demand more than that. And he didn't come in as sort of the complete finished article at that age. But then you look over the past kind of decade plus, he's built kind of a legendary body of work. Now, I'm not saying Garcia is going to be that, but why can't he incrementally get better until he's 24, 25?
The age thing is the argument, because Ronald Araujo is 22, which is 2 years older than Eric Garcia.
Right.
Oscar Mingueza is 21. He's a year older than Eric Garcia. A reminder, too, that because Eric Garcia, and this is kind of the precocious thing you were mentioning, because he left the academy at the cadet A level at age 17, after captaining, he was considered one of the better captains of all time in La Masia. So he's on this team with Ansu Fati and Takefusa Kubo, and they're probably the most famous cadet A side that potentially the academy has had in recent seasons, next to even the 1987, Messi and Piqué and Fabregas, et cetera, et cetera. So he to think that he's 20, and this season, and his 20-year season, if you will, he only played 12 times, and a lot of those appearances stopped happening. Like, he stopped getting those appearances not only through a few injuries, but also when it became clear that he was going to come to Barcelona, and that was around December, January. So those appearances kind of dried up. And in those matches, in those 12 appearances this year, his team conceded 1-0-0-5, 1-0-0-3, 2-1-1, and 1. So his whole season has been defined by the 5-2 defeat to Leicester back in September and the 4-3 win over Newcastle 2 weeks ago when they scored 3. I understand the metrics say tackle success of 57%. He lost more duels than he won, both on the ground and in the air. And he also was able to avoid any officially recognized errors that led to a goal or own goals. But just like Aguero, how we skipped this season, not say this season was a mulligan, but going back 1 year, when he was 19, he did make 25 appearances for Pep Guardiola in a team And in that team, they only conceded more than one goal with him on the field just once. So every game he played in was either a 0 or a 1, and the one was a 3-2 loss to Wolverhampton. So they never conceded 3 goals with him on the field in 25 appearances 2 years ago when he was 19. So again, a reminder that for people who want to throw out that Eric Garcia was on the field, he looked shambolic this season. Yeah, you're probably right. In that one match that you saw this year when they lost 5-2 against Leicester, yes, he was utter garbage. And I think people are afraid that he doesn't really have the breakneck speed and the pace. But the advanced metrics that I'm going to go through shortly just, I think, dictate the fact that he's, I think, going to complement some of the other players in the squad really, really well. So I think the center back pairing that people are afraid of are PK and Garcia. But as you mentioned with Aguero, I don't think Garcia at age 20 comes in as immediately a starter. But I also think that he's coming back to his boyhood club, to where he's from in Catalonia, and he's going to play more than the 12 times that he was playing for Man City with Pep Guardiola. I think he's better than 12 appearances in a season, and if they get 25 to 35 matches out of Eric Garcia, whether coming off the bench or as a starter, that's more than enough for 20, and he'll be turning 21 soon, but for a 21-year-old center back who has all the potential that he has. But even the advanced metrics thing, I understand the defensive side of the ball, but what he allows Barcelona to do, I think, by going after his defensive, we'll say, not even deficiencies, but the ways that he's trying to improve defensively, I think people are missing the mark as to just how good of an offensive center back, and not talking about scoring goals. I'm just talking about controlling and dictating a game, putting a team under pressure and wearing them down the way that Man City does. Just having a team by the 75th, 80th minute go, they still have the ball. We cannot take the ball off of them, and they're wearing us down. We're losing legs, and these subs just aren't helping. So the other, before I go through the numbers, Emile, I do want to, the final kind of big counter argument point that I can have you respond to is that for the Man City issues he had this year, I don't understand why we're not speaking about his appearances with Spain. Because for 12 appearances with Man City, he's appeared for Spain 7 or 8 times in the last year now too. So he only played for Man City 4 times more than he played for Spain. And again, and in Spain, he was part of that 6-0 win over Germany. So if you count the 5-2 to Leicester, why didn't you count the 6-0 over Germany back in November when he played 47 minutes? Plus the 0-0 against Portugal back in October and the 1-1 against the Netherlands in November. So if you cherry pick his bad matches to prove a point, I don't know why we can't highlight his good ones to kind of, inspire this confidence in people that and I think the other argument is, well, Jean-Claire Todibo was on the book, so why bringing Eric Garcia? Well, Jean-Claire Todibo, it's not even about personality, but for some reason or another, whether it was an old board or whatever it was, those are the sins of the past, and you kind of have to move forward. If Todibo is going to be bought by Nice, you kind of have to take that money and move forward with Eric Garcia. I think it's unfair to Garcia to say, hey, this other 20-year-old who came in that was promising didn't work out, therefore this one absolutely won't, because physically Todibo looks like a better defender, and he does, and the advanced metrics say that he probably is.
Yeah, and look, I think the Todibo thing, I never understood kind of the way that's seemingly or apparently going to sort of end is it does. It's a bummer. It's really unfortunate that, because yeah, I agree. I understand you look at Todibo and you think this guy looks great. He just looks like just a part of a dominant back line potentially at his best. And if he grows into that, he'd be fantastic. But whatever it is that happened there, where he never got sort of, whether it was fully acclimated or sufficient opportunity or anything like that, that damage seems to be done. It's kind of like you said, it's sort of the sins of the past, and I don't know how much you can go and kind of paper over any of that. But that's the thing, and that's kind of a sunk cost. That's all happened. That shouldn't color why. That shouldn't color how you view young defenders, like the next good young defender or potentially good young defender that comes along. And, the fact that it didn't work out with one guy that's actually all the more reason to try to find the next good young defender, rather than sort of pine for some sort of kind of rebound in the relationship with someone else who's either out of favor or himself fed up with the club and just wants to leave. And I mean, that's sometimes there's just, it was the wrong place at the wrong time, and just, ships passing in the night and whatnot. And just, it stinks, but that was, and there's no reason to sort of paint the next guy that comes in sort of with the same brush. It's because, as you said too, he's coming back to the club of his, to his boyhood club, to the club of his sort of his hometown or his home area.
Yeah, I mean, he was only gone for 3 years. A reminder, he's been at Barcelona for his whole career, and then he just got better at Man City for 3 years, where he became a professional.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, you can only imagine. I mean, I don't even know, but you can only imagine just how sort of fired up and motivated he's going to be too. I mean, he's legitimately getting an honest, hopefully an honest to goodness crack at sort of the dream, and if he can kind of improve, and if he can play well, he gets to be on the Barcelona back line, with 100,000 people at Camp Nou sort of cheering. I mean, that's probably ever since for as long as he has memories in his brain, that's probably like the thing he's wanted more than anything else. And it's conceivably, it's there. I mean, it's, he's going to get a tangible opportunity to do that. And I mean, I can only imagine that he's, and there's nothing about kind of, he's not a bad worker. Like he's not known for having kind of a bad attitude or anything like that. So there's no reason to assume that he's going to come in and not work hard, or just kind of, slack off, or, whatever, just get caught up in the nightlife and sort of drift away because of that. I mean, he deserves a shot to be very good, and there's no reason why he can't be a decent to good player.
Yeah. Well, and I think the expectations for him should be understanding, and I'm going to finish this with a really boring part about these numbers. What he's good at and the style of play that he can help dictate, he's very good at. And what he's not good at, he's very not good at, if you will. I know that's improper English. So in the small sample size this year against other center backs, he registered in the 96th percentile for non-penalty expected goals plus expected assists. And like other Man City players, he was also in the 99th percentile for passes attempted, progressive carries, and pass completion percentage. And then he was in the 89th percentile in progressive passes of more than 10 yards towards the opponent's goal at almost 4.42 per game. Meaning, and I think you understand what that means, and in relation to Clement Lenglet, he was less than half of that for progressive passes in that percentile. So unfortunately, the negatives. He was in the 43rd percentile in tackles per game, which is not superb for a center back. He was 51st percentile with pressures per game, even for a team that pressed quite a lot and high, one of the highest pressing sides in the world. And then he was in the 1 percentile, not 10, 1 percentile with 0.52 blocks per game. But that also isn't the way that Man City played defensively. They did not set themselves up to allow an opponent to have a lot of pressure on them and to take long shots. That's not what Man City was trying to funnel their defense to do. And then the other thing, too, is he is in the 6th percentile, not the 60th, but the 6th percentile with aerial duels won. So certainly that's also something that's not great.
Yeah, the aerial duels is really kind of suboptimal, but, there's hopefully that's something that can be sort of coached up and kind of hopefully tacticked up, and, something that he can himself work on. And, it's an area that needs improvement, no doubt. Mm-hmm. Now, as far as the blocks per game, I mean, I'm sort of, I don't think the 1 percentile or 1st percentile for Man City really, I don't worry about that. I mean, I definitely don't know if he's good at blocking shots or not, because the thing is, how many shots do a lot of those Man City sides give up?
Right.
I mean, how many chances are there to block a shot? So, I mean, I imagine even, whoever is good on their team at blocking shots probably doesn't rack up that many of them.
Oh, well, I was comparing it to Mingueza and Araujo, actually, as far as if we're talking specifically about blocks. Mingueza is in the 63rd percentile with 1.81 blocks per game, and then Araujo is in the 89th percentile with 2.15 blocks per game. So, I mean, even if this is something that he's going to have to improve upon, if you will, or it seems like Barcelona's style of letting in more goals than Man City did means that these young center backs have to block more shots. So I do want to compare then to, say, Oscar Mingueza, who was in the 97th, remember, for Eric Garcia was 43rd percentile in tackles per game. Mingueza was in the 97th percentile with tackles per game with 2.77. As a Mingueza, was still in the 63rd percentile with blocks, and then Mingueza was in the 1 percentile, just like Garcia was in the 1 percentile for blocks. Mingueza was in the 1 percentile on clearances and aerial duels won. So neither of them really winning aerial duels at all, worse than Garcia. And then offensively, that just being on the other side of the ball, as much as Mingueza was good with positional play and finding the open man and he just felt natural in the system, he was in a lesser percentile in every category offensively for Garcia that I did mention. But the numbers do dictate that I think, as much as I talk about Mingueza, it seems that Ronald Araujo, in the long term, those two seem to be suitable complements to one another as long-term potential partners that you'd want to groom. To 2 to 3 years' time, you're talking still a 23 and a 24-year-old center back. And Garcia, because he can play on the left side and the right side, he is very positional in ways that Lenglet and even Araujo playing on the left are not. And Araujo, a reminder too, that he's in the, as I said, 89th percentile with blocks and the 67th percentile for aerial duels won at 2.87. So Araujo does win those in a way that you could set up, in a way that Lenglet and Piqué kind of win them, and Umtiti really didn't, and they actually make up for Alba and Dest, who are in the lower percentile of aerial duels won by wingbacks. And then, little fact here is Iash Moriba, by the way, is in the 83rd percentile for aerial duels won among forwards midfielders rather, with 1.95. Busquets, meanwhile, is in less than the 20 percentile, even though he is taller than most of his teammates. But again, that's not part of his game. And for these La Masia players, be it whether it's Busquets, whether it's Garcia, winning aerial duels is not what it all comes down to. It's controlling the pace of a game. It's dictating where the ball goes. So even when the other team is clearing it, recovering the ball isn't about winning and recovering that ball in the air. And players and teams who try to do that against Barcelona, it either gets snatched up by Ter Stegen or it gets cleared out by Araujo, or it forces it out to the wings where now you can bring that extra man. So it's all about how you dictate your defensive scheme. And because of what he can do offensively, I think it helps Barcelona out. And in the counterattack, it's always been a worry. And same thing what we just said about Kun Aguero, that if you have Aguero, Messi, Busquets, Piqué, Garcia, clearly there are problems there, but it's all about personnel. And so I don't think he's going to be left on this island with just Piqué and Busquets and Messi and Aguero again up the middle. I don't think Ronald Koeman's going to do that. And if he is, that means that there's something that he's improving or working on, that there's some trust in him. So for all those reasons, I understand that people are negative about Garcia. I understand defensively what they're seeing as to why they're afraid, as to why you think putting all that together is going to be Barcelona continue to leak goals, because scoring goals wasn't their problem this year. Leaking in goals was their problem. And Garcia, on paper, doesn't look like he's going to individually be able to solve that, but I just need to have people understand at the age of 20 the potential he has to be a part of this winning product moving forward, especially in terms of a style of play. And he continues to bring Barcelona back to, I don't want to use the trite argument of the Barca way, but he continues to move Barcelona back to the way that you want to watch them. And that's kind of the promise I give listeners, that if you want to see Barcelona play the way you imagine them in your head, Eric Garcia is a part of that picture. And that is why I'm most excited about him, even of all the issues he has at the age of 20. It sounds like I'm just, propping up propaganda for these signings, but for free transfers, I think they're good signings. I don't understand the Eric Garcia hate, but I do, because I watch the games too, and I see what people are afraid of.
Sure. I mean, there's logical sort of fear and concern. And I mean, I kind of take a step back and, what was it? I guess maybe, was it like a week ago or a few days ago when Joan Laporta was talking about kind of and everyone just kind of read it as, Koeman was on his way out or something like that. Mm-hmm. When he kind of talked about the sort of the end of an era and we need to yeah, I don't even remember the words that he used, but essentially like we need to shift the project, or we need to refresh and things like that. Well, given that there isn't a, just sort of a blank check to pay transfer fees right now, this that whole thing isn't a one summer project or one summer objective. So these are all kind of meant to be, I think, incremental moves. Now, obviously, the hope is that Eric Garcia is a long-term starter and kind of a star and things like that. But I think these are all kind of low risk. And for lack of I mean, I don't want to call them wagers, but they're essentially like low risk wagers,
Yeah.
low downside, and this is part of what the next Barca team is going to look like. I mean, because we just spent the last, I mean, at least 6 years, I think longer than that. I wrote something 3 years ago on the heels of uh, sort of Neymar's departure and subsequent transfers. We're kind of breaking down all big transfers that Barca had made since. I mean, I think I went back to even like kind of 2005, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And in the past, I think since the summer of, I think it was Suarez, Rakitic, and Ter Stegen, there has been so little. There's been so much money spent and so little tangible return for that money. Whether it's Dembele, whether it's Griezmann, whether it's Coutinho, whether it's there was Arthur, or I mean, I guess theoretically, Miralem Pjanic was a cost saving. He was he was accounting. He was shuffling some deck chairs, and so, but he hasn't yielded much. Who am I missing? I mean, there was Arda Turan, Alex Villarreal, Paco Alcacer.
Well, even the deals
Gomes,
for
like just
I mean, even the deals for Lenglet and TT are they get
those
unfortunately
now they don't.
Right, exactly. Right. They were great the first year we had it, and that money looks like it made sense, and now it's over time it's making less and less. But to your point, free transfers, it's not going to look worse. And for Garcia too, I mean, Aguero, how bad could this be? Well, this year could be for Barcelona what last year was for Man City. It could be a worst case scenario for Aguero, and I think people are getting frustrated. But for Garcia, I mean, I don't know. I just watching him for Spain. How low is his ceiling? Because that's really what I'm at. I'm asking that. I'm excited about how low how high is his floor? Yeah, let me reverse that. How high is his floor? I think his floor is pretty high. And I think his floor is easily worth a free transfer.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I mean, it's with him especially. I mean, we have very little to go on as far as kind of games at the top level. So there's, as far as body of work, we can only kind of pick here and there and sort of see little bits and pieces. And so without being able to kind of definitively sort of predict the future, this seems like the sort of scenario that's worth exploring, because you're not out anything if it doesn't work. And if it does work, you look brilliant. If this guy is part of the next great Barca back line, and you brought him back home after 3 years under Pep Guardiola for no money, you look like a genius.
Right.
And so, and
I think moving forward for Depay and Wijnaldum, if they are to come, it's interesting when I think about fit and I see Aguero and I see Garcia and I say, you can easily see what their role will be with this squad this year. And so even though, as I said, Depay and Wijnaldum might be those transfers, if they come, that could be the difference in title races and winning Champions Leagues. I mean, that is how beneficial those two players could be. That said, to me, I think they're the fits or the roles that they're going to play are the ones that I worry about a little bit more, right? They're the ones that I'm worrying are going to block younger talents that Barca already have. They're the ones that I think are potentially going to get in the way, or they're the ones that I don't necessarily fit in the style that Barca, in this ideal perfect world of FC Barcelona playing the way that we all want them to. They're the two that I think could potentially, if things go wrong, get in the way of that, or they could enhance that. So I think the arguments as to the high risk and the risk and the rewards of some of these transfers and bringing these players, I think with Depay and Wijnaldum, they're going to be the ones that the reward is going to be greater for bringing those two in this summer. But I think if things go wrong, it's going to look worse, even if they are free transfers. But I think we're going to have time, Emile, to talk about that because I think that'll wrap up this show. I want to thank you for joining me. We have Wijnaldum, we have Depay potentially, and who else knows? And the other thing that Laporta keeps mentioning is he's talking about exits. He mentions at every press conference that, don't get attached to everybody in the squad because not everyone's going to be here next year, and you understand that. So we are going to be talking plenty about exits as well, I think, in the coming weeks. And if it's any rate, Emile, about the number of signings we already had this week in Aguero and Garcia, well, we do have another show coming out this week. It's not going to be about transfers. So if Barca signs one player every day of this week and they start to have players leave, well, it seems like business is going to be happening fast, but we'll be talking about it next week.
That sounds great. Yeah. And I do think so. I think the exits have been sort of that's been what's been kind of bandied about so much. And all of it is kind of rumor and conjecture, and so little of it has actually happened that I think we're kind of at that point where it's going to, like, the rubber is going to meet the road with the exits kind of soon in the next few weeks, I think.
Yep, yeah, and as we said, we kind of close it with the Feliz Cumpleaños tomorrow to Kun Aguero. He'll be 33, which, it worries you a little bit, but nevertheless, we'll see what he and Garcia can provide, and we'll continue to break down what and the role that they could fit in the team as the summer goes on. So again, that'll wrap up another show. You can find us on Twitter at the Barcelona Pod. You can also follow both of us, both Emile and I, individually. And Instagram, we're also at the Barcelona Pod. Our closed Facebook group, the Barcelona Podcast, you can ask questions as well as have a discussion. That's where I learned so much about the negativity involving Eric Garcia. So thank you to our listener group there for letting me kind of know what the groupthink is. Then Patreon is how we keep making these shows. Always, always appreciated. You can listen to these shows without the ads over there as well. So a little incentive to support the show. And we are on YouTube at the Barcelona Podcast. And most importantly, thanks so much for listening to the Barcelona Podcast. Until next time, we'll talk to you soon. And Forza Barca.
Forza Barca.